Hey guys, Bearded here, bringing you my third Albion video. This will be the second video in my YouTube Albion tutorial series. And today we're going to cover the resources and biomes and a little bit of the gathering. So right here we are looking at the Royal Continent just so you can get an overview of what the different biomes look like, and then we'll jump into what each of the biomes consist of and what they have. We are going to cover each of the main cities and what biomes they reside in. First, we have Thetford, and Thetford is located in the Swamp biome. Following that, we've got Fort Sterling in the Mountains biome. Then we have Limhurst in the Forest biome. That is followed by Bridgewatch in the Steppe, and Martlock in the Highlands. Each of these biomes will always have the same resources in them, except for the tiers of resource will change. Now, going over each of the biomes, first we have the Forest Zone. In the Forest Zone, you will always find wood, stone, and hide. In the Steppe, you are always going to find hide, fiber, and ore. In the Highlands, you are always going to find wood, stone, and ore. And in the Swamp, you are always going to find wood, hide, fiber. And in the Mountains, you will always find stone, fiber, and ore. I want to cover enchantments on resources. Every resource above tier 4 can enchant. An enchantment can be 0.1, 0.2, or 0.3. That level is indicated by the swirls around the resource itself. 0.1 is green, 0.2 is blue, and 0.3 is purple. Now you can check the enchantment levels of a zone by opening your local map with the hotkey N. And on this local map, you will see the percentage that each resource has to enchant. So in this map, you have a 20% chance for a 0.1, 2% chance for 0.2, and a 0.2% chance for a 0.3. All resources will respawn over time. You can see that this is 1 out of 5. If I was not going to chop this tree and I let it sit there, it would slowly regenerate. The same is true for all 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 resources, with the exception of large tier 7 and large tier 8 resources. Those will respawn already filled up to the max. A tier 7 large resource has 23 ticks available on it, and a tier 8 large has 27. Here you can see a great example of a 6.3 tree, however it's already chopped. And then up here, what you're going to see is an aspect. This aspect is a zone mini boss, I guess you could say. They can spawn in any tier 6, 7, or 8 zones, and they will spawn as the primary resource in that zone. So because we're in a swamp, this is a fiber aspect. So if we kill this aspect, we can then harvest it. If we kill this aspect, we can then harvest its body and collect fiber from it. They have 500 ticks. Aspects will always be tier 6, regardless of the tier zone that they spawn in, and they also can enchant. There are aspects for every single type of resource, up to and including scanning. They are a very great way to make money and a very great way to power level your gathering skills. The next thing I wanted to cover was gathering yield when you're gathering resources. You can see there I've got a gathering bonus and a premium bonus. If you have premium, you have a 50% increased gathering yield, meaning if I gather one resource, then I have a 50% chance to gather an additional resource from that particular gathering node. In addition to that, you also have another type of gathering yield that you can increase. Those increases come from gathering gear, gathering food, and Avalonian tools, as well as your spec in gathering that specific tier of resource, whatever it may be. That gathering yield can go over a 100%, so you can have, I think, up to 145% gathering yield. So every single time you gather, you will get an extra resource proc for gathering, and it can even proc twice. So instead of getting +1 gathering yield, you can get a +2 gathering yield or a +3 gathering yield. Now, the higher tier you are, the lower that chance is in terms of what you can get from it. So I don't think you can proc a gathering yield more than twice on a tier 8, even with full gathering gear and food and Avalonian tools and max spec. Here you can see me killing a resource monster. Resource monsters spawn in gathering zones, and they spawn as the primary type of resource in that zone. So in this forest zone, I have seen this forest spirit. I can kill it and then I can harvest it for wood. This is a tier 3 forest spirit in this tier 5 zone. Another thing to note about these is if you kill the resource monsters, you gather them much more quickly than if you gathered a resource node of the same type as that monster. The next thing I wanted to cover are tier 7 and tier 8 resources. They have both large and small nodes available, meaning they can spawn as one big large one, as you see here, this 8.1 tree. It's already been harvested, but if this was not harvested, it would be a massive tree and it would have a lot more wood available to harvest from it. I think it would have 27 ticks available to harvest, meaning I could chop it 27 times. In addition to that, there are small nodes. Tier 8s yield 2 ticks and tier 7s yield 3 ticks as a small node. I think there's one actually up over here. So this is what a small node for tier 8 looks like. It is also enchanted, and right here we have a small tier 7. So we have 1 of 3 ticks available on this tier 7 node. One of the final things I wanted to cover was how do you determine what tier of resources are going to be in a zone. Every zone will have 3 tiers of resources in them. The highest tier being the same tier of that zone, and then 2 tiers previous to that. So if I have a tier 5 zone, there will be tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5 resources. In a tier 8 zone, there will be tier 6, 7, and 8. In a tier 7 zone, there will be tier 5, 6, and 7. So just to reiterate, whatever the tier zone is, -2, that's going to be your range for what tiers of resource you will find in that zone. The only exception to this is the tier 7 zones inside the Royal Continent. You will not find tier 7 or tier 8 resources in the Royal Continent. So even though Camelin and Runnel Sink are tier 7 zones, they will only have tier 6 resources. Now, if you remember back to my first video, we briefly covered this, but there are local production bonuses for each city. And I bring this up again because there is a certain city you should refine your resources in, depending on what resource it is. So if you have wood, you should be refining it in Fort Sterling. If you have fiber, you should be refining it in Limhurst. If you have stone, it should be Bridgewatch, hides in Martlock, and finally, ore in Thetford. I tell you this because it is 100% to your benefit to spend the time transporting your resources there to get an increased yield, because you will make more money because of that. So take the time to do it, and I promise you'll be happy. One of the last things we'll cover here are going to be resource outcrops. Now, we kind of briefly covered this in the last video, but you can see here that I'm pointing out different resource outcrops with different symbols. What these mean are there is a high concentration of that particular type of resource in that zone. In addition to there being a high concentration of that resource in that zone, there will also be a world boss or resource boss, not to be confused with aspects, but a resource boss that will spawn every 48 hours after it dies. Those resource bosses yield, I believe, 2,500 ticks to harvest from. They are extremely worthwhile to use to make money and power level your gathering. So if you can find one, get a group of people together and go kill that thing, because it'll be really, really worth it. I think that is all I have right now on resources. I will go very in-depth on gathering on my next video. If I left something out, please let me know, and I can edit the video to add that in. If you think that I did a terrible job, let me know so I can do a better job in the future. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.